Okay, so main topic, right? Main topic of this lecture is section 4.10, the correlation in R, right? And I assume that you already read previous sections, right? The step number one is 4.1, 2, 3, 4, and 7, right? I assume that you already read this chapter, right? 4.2, 3, 4, and 7. 7 is evaluation, right? So if you have not read these subsections, and please stop this lecture and then first read these subsections, right? And then after section 4.10, right? And then please read section 4.8, by yourself, right? Okay, so that's step number 2. Okay. Okay. Now, there's a couple of ways you can read a file. And first way is, as I showed in my previous lecture, right? You can basically you can use a read CSV file, and then you can provide full path, right? Followed by this file name, right? And then make sure that you have extra backspace, right? So that's like one way. And the second way is, as book shows, that you can use file choose, right? I think then you have I think you'll see some pop-up window, and then you can choose the file. So that's the second way. Although I don't really like this second way, but anyway. The third way is that you can set the working directory, right? So, for example, if you use RStudio, right? So there is if you go to File, right? Files, and then you can see this icon, right? Go to directory, right? So you can go to a directory, a certain directory. Let's say for me is, right? So this is, let's say I set this as my working directory, right? MMM book. So now this is my working directory, and in this working directory, right? I create the directory called data, right? And then you see, right? I copied all the data set, right? So now I know that this is my working directory, right? So I'll just choose this as my working directory. So if you just click more and then set as working directory, right? You see that set WD. We learned this function, right? This command set WD. So this is my, now it's current is my what? The working directory, right? Then in that case, I don't have to really use a full path. Instead, I can what? I can use what? I can use the I can provide the relative path, right? So the colon is the current directory, right? The colon is current directory, and then followed by this 2 backslash, right? And then so this is like a current directory of my working directory. Actually, this is my working directory, right? So this is the current directory, and then right, this is my current directory, right? This is my my working directory, right? And then under my working directory, right, I have a data directory. So data, right? So this is my current working directory, and then data is this directory, right? Under data, I have a chapter for dataset CSV, right? So I'm gonna just change this as chapter 4, that dataset CSV, right? Header, it's yes, it's true, right? Okay. So I'm gonna run this. Good. So it looks like it's successful. And then let's take a look at this, first couple of rows, right? Good. So it's an installation rating and outdoor temperature, right? I have number of occupants, home age, home size, and heating oil used, right? So, okay. So that's, I showed you a couple of ways to read a file, right? CSV file. Okay. Now the next is we need to see the, I'm going to, so using the R, right, I'm going to create this correlation table, right? Okay, so if you use this COR command, correlation, the functions, right? You can see this correlation matrix, right? So basically you can use this, you can see this correlation matrix. And the method, right? There are a couple of, actually there are three main methods, but the Pearson is obviously the is most the popular method. So let's just use this the Pearson method to find or to create this correlation matrix. Okay. So now let's see. Okay. So you know what? Okay, just change the position. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna just follow the book example. It's the same variable name. Chapter 4, correlations. I'm using the exact same variable name. Of course, this is a variable name, so you can use any variable name, right? And then COR, that's a functions, right? And then that's a data, right? Chapter 4, 3 data, right? So first argument is chapter 4. Oops, you know what? I forgot to change, so please should be chapter 4 data, right? And let's just run one more time. Okay, I mean it really does not matter, but I like to follow the book's example as it is, right? Okay, and then data, right? And then method, right? Method is what? The Pearson, right? P-A-R-S-N, right? So that's a Pearson method. And then if you want to see the results, you can use the view functions, right? Okay. And then, by the way, so in this book, right? So this is like a Pearson, but there is another method. If you look at the book, there is another method called Kendall. Okay, but we'll first run this correlation function with the Pearson method. Then we'll use the Kendall, okay, the Kendall method. Okay, so let's just view, right? Let's just view the result. Okay, so and then view, right? Okay, so make sure that you use this uppercase letter V, right? And chapter 4, and then right. Okay, so now let's just run. Right? Oops. Oh, I forgot to. First, I had to run this. Run, right? And then, okay. So I can see this correlation matrix, right? Okay, so it's obviously, right? Is this a diagonal, right? It's all ones, right? Because it's like insulation rating and insulation rating, the coefficient value is 1, right? So if you look at the diagonal, it's all 1, of course, right? Okay, so please observe this value, right? And then please take a look at this read sec of 4.9. I mean the 4.8. Okay, so and then let's just run this run this correlation functions using another method, which is Kendall, right? Chapter 4. Okay, so they're using, if you look at the book uses the same variable name, but I'm gonna use a different variable name. Okay, so let's say this is for the Kendall, right? So I'll just say Kendall, right? Okay. Good. And then same functions, correlations functions, and chapter 4 data, right? And this time the method is Kendall, right? So I want you to, okay, so first let's just run this, right? Oops. Okay, so let's just run this. Okay, and then let's just view this result, right? Okay, so I want you to compare this result and read this, right? And then I want you to compare these two results, okay? But as you can see, let's see. Okay, the candle, right? Its algorithm is developed by this Maurice Kendall in 1930s, whereas this Pearson was developed in like much earlier, like 100 years ago, right? And it's extremely common method for calculating the correlationship, right? So that's a Pearson method. But the candle, right? It's also is widely used, and especially, right? Especially if the data set is being evaluated, is known to contain the statistical outliers in one or more of the attributes. Okay, so that's so if you have outliers, right? And using the candle method is preferred. And there's another one. Let's see. I think there's another one. Yes. And was this another third method was developed by this guy, right? The Charles Spearman. Right? So there's a third method, but in the book, like right now, his book shows the two main methods, the Pearson and Kendall, right? Yeah. So I want you to carefully compare these two results, right? Result by the Pearson and result by Kendall method, right? And then to see if this is true. The coefficient using Kendall's are lower than those using Pearson. Okay, so please make sure that this is true, right? By comparing these two results. Okay, one by Pearson and another result by Kendall, right? Okay, thank you. Bye.